I love the match with Steve Austin. I think it's a beautiful story. It's such great drama and such violence. It's beautiful violence. When you look at UFC, like I love UFC and I have a lot of respect for them, but when you see these guys breaking each other's forearms in half and stuff like that, or punching some guy's face in, and knowing his kids and his family are in the front row watching and stuff, I find it really unsettling. It just really makes me feel like I hope these guys are making enough money, because I'm sure glad I made a living doing what I'm doing instead of what they're doing. I'd much rather pretend and wrestle a guy like Steve Austin and know that we never hurt each other one time. Like, it was such a beautiful match for two guys totally making each other. Steve Austin was trying his hardest to make me, and I was trying my hardest to make Steve Austin. And that's what's so beautiful about that match. And there's things in that match that are just so. When I watch it back, that was so well done. Like, there's a part where I'm punching Steve in the corner, and I'm just punching him and wailing on him, and he's bleeding, and I step back, and then he just kicks me right in the nuts. And if you watch that, it's so real. Like, it's like you watch it and you go, that had to hurt. Like, that had to be real. And that's what pro wrestling is all about. It's about pretending to be real, but in fact, no animals were harmed in the making of that movie. And it was two guys really working together and I love all the little things we did, the chair spots, at the very end of that match, when I went to throw, Steve had to go out of the ring on a certain side. I had to throw him out on one side of the ring in order for it to work out right. But and Steve, in the sort of the spur of the moment, or in the heat of the moment, he threw me out of the ring on the wrong side of the apron. The bell was on the other side, right? I had to land on the apron where the bell was, and he threw me out on the wrong side of the ring. You think it's a small, insignificant little mistake, but it would have screwed up the whole ending of the match if I'd stayed out. So I fell out. I held onto the rope and landed on the apron, and then while the referee's backing Steve up, and I knew Steve knew when he threw me out, he goes, "Oh, I threw you out on the wrong side." So we both knew it was like a mistake, but it was like too hard to fix it in the middle of the moment. So he threw me out, and the referee backed Steve up, and I remember I somehow got back up on the apron and fell into the ring, and then staggered and fell out on the right side of the ring where I was supposed to be. All before Steve even turned around. I just remember when Steve turned back around, I was in the right spot. He was like, "Oh, thank God." And so that would have screwed up the whole match for everybody, and it wouldn't have been the match that we talk about today if it had been on the wrong rope or wrong side. But that was even the thing with the bell and all the stuff. Like, we're like, the way I love when I watch it back, and I think I can't remember what I grabbed first. It's a chair. No, I grab the bell, and I bring the bell over to the apron. I'm going to smash him, cave his skull in with the bell. And then it's like, no, wait a minute. I'm going to use a chair instead. And I walk over and I get the chair and throw the chair onto the bottom rope. But the beauty of it is, like, everyone forgets the bell now. Like, no one's paying attention to the bell, and I use the chair on Steve instead. And that bell just sitting on the apron for the whole match, and no one even notices it. No one thinks to move it or do anything about it. And but it's such great storytelling, in my opinion, anyway. And even the blood. I remember that day in the dressing room, like me and Steve, when we walked out for that match, I remember I was trying to explain to people, like, we were both we had just wrestled at Survivor Series, and our thing was kind of building nicely, but I didn't think we were going to work again so quick. I was thinking, once I win the belt to Sean at WrestleMania, I'll work with Steve maybe SummerSlam or something like that, and then we'll have a second match, and it'll be a different story than the Survivor Series. But when they threw us together at WrestleMania, it was like, that's exactly what it was. They just threw us together cold. And I remember going, even though we had lots of, he cost me at the Rumble and he did all these things to me, it was like, I was thinking it was going to be me and Sean. So I was still a little pissed off because Shawn forfeited the belt and somehow went to Sid. And Sid and Undertaker get the main event spot, and they get the main event money. And me and Steve Austin were just a throw together match on the card. So we didn't really have a lot of, I love Steve and I would love working with him, but I was like, I didn't have anything special in mind that day when we got to WrestleMania in Chicago. And it was like, we went out to the ring to talk about the match. And we were just kind of talking about it almost like we didn't give a And I said, the way I see this match is it's like two guys having a street fight, like or a school fight. After school, everyone's going to want to see the sort of the old, I was the sort of popular guy in school kind of thing with the long hair and popular with everybody. And there's this new bald-headed guy comes to school and he's the new badass. Everyone's talking about him being the tough guy. And so you can almost sort of see a collision between these two characters coming. And it's like, that's what I thought of. I said, this reminds me of a school fight. And that's how we had that match. We kind of put it together like a school fight. And I can remember I said to Steve, you know what would really make this match? And I mean, Steve was the only guy that knew that we were going to basically switch places, that at the end of the match, I would be the heel and he would be the babyface. And it's like, how are we going to pull that off? And I remember we just kind of talked about everything, but I had said to Steve, I said, you know what would really make this match? I said, if you got a little blood, make the whole thing. Trust me on that. You'll get the sympathy. It'll be like, it'll change the whole dynamic of everything. And I remember Steve said to me, he goes, I ain't never done it before, but I'll sure as hell try, or something like that. And I was like, you want to practice at WrestleMania. You can't, WrestleMania is too big I don't know how many people in this room have cut their heads with a razor blade, but it's not very easy to do. It's not like Mickey O'Rourke and the wrestler where you take a piece of broken glass and you carve your head up. It's a very delicate thing to do, and it's not easy to do, and you got to be careful you don't cut the top of your head off. And I've seen that happen. And at the same time, I remember the first time I ever tried it, I ended up with about 100 little scratches on my head that hurt like hell, but they weren't very deep and it didn't bleed very much. And it was kind of like, it's a very difficult thing to learn how to do. You can only learn with experience. But anyway, so I told Steve, I said, you don't want to practice at WrestleMania. So I would never tell you this because it's true. When I first got in the business, the first thing I was told is don't ever let anybody cut you with a razor blade, ever, under any circumstance. Don't ever let anyone else do it. If you got to do it yourself. And I always believed that, and it was true because a lot of guys that let somebody do it for them end up going for stitches and stuff like that. It was usually a mistake. And I told Steve that day. I said, Steve, I would never tell this to anyone else, but let me do it. I said, I can do it, and I'll take care of you on it. I'll make sure that he goes. And he was like, I can do it. And I said, no, let me do it. So he did. And that gives you the idea of the trust and respect that Steve had for me. And so I told him, I said, because in those days at that time, blood had been outlawed for a couple of years at that point. In fact, the only one that ever got blood was me. I got blooded with Roddy Piper, and I got blood with Davey at the In Your House, and all of them were situations where we weren't allowed to get blood, and it was all done on our own, like done by myself. And it was always had to be played up like it was real, like you accidentally hit your head and it was real. I remember coming back after I wrestled Davey, and the commissioner goes, yeah, he hit his head on the stairs, and they put real stitches in my head that night, about 5. But you do it for the love of the sport, I guess, or the business. But with Steve, I remember he trusted me, and I said, Steve, if for any reason you have second thoughts in the ring and you want me to abort getting the blood, we can pass. Like, because we can get you could get fired, probably not, but and I probably get fired, probably not, but we'll both get fined maybe, or you get suspended, or there's definitely going to be, if they think that it was done on purpose, it could be an issue. So we made a deal that we would never tell anybody. And so I told him, I said, I will, because I used to carry the razor blade. I'd stick it right here under my lip. I carried him under my lip pressed against my gum for the whole match. Even when I did my interview before I went out to the ring, I had it in my mouth. And funny enough, it stays right there. It doesn't move around. Like you tape it up with tape, like white medical tape or whatever. So it's kind of got kind of a rough edge to it. But I remember it just sat right there in my gum for the whole match. And I remember telling Steve, like, the hardest part is to get it to your hand. Like, how do you get the razor blade from your mouth to your hand? So you got to spit it out on the mat somewhere during the match and then get it in your hand without anyone noticing. And you have it in your finger, your thumb and your finger. So I had to wrestle Steve for most of the match. I didn't want it in my hand until I needed it. So I remember it was like, okay, you ready? Are we going to do it? And it's like, okay, let's do it. And I was like, I just spit it out and I got it in my hand kind of thing. Actually, what it was Steve, me did a spot. If you watch WrestleMania 13, it's like I gave him a couple of elbows or something and I hit the ropes and he sidestepped me and he went to throw me out of the ring. And he threw me out of the ring and I landed on the floor. Then I spit it out on the mat and I have it in my hand. And I had asked Steve before he threw me out, like if it was will you give me the green light kind of thing? And it's like, yeah, let's do it. And then when he got out on the floor, he goes, maybe not. And I had told Steve in the dressing room, I said, once I got it in my hand, there's no turning back. I said, you can change your mind anytime you want, but once I spit it out and I got it in my hand, because that's the hardest part, is to get it to your hand without anyone noticing it. And when he changed his mind, I remember I'm throwing him into the table and all that, where Vince and all them were at. I'm reversing him and I'm going, too late. If you watch it, I don't know if you can see it close enough, but I yelled in his ear, too late. And he ran into the railing. And I think it's a masterpiece of professionalism when you watch that, because Steve's facing the entire crowd. I grabbed Steve and grabbed him in a rear chin lock, a really tight one too, so he wouldn't squirm his head or move around, because that's how guys get hurt. Is, I watched Dynamite Kid cut Davey Boy one time, and in a match when he was younger. And Dynamite grabbed him and put him in a rear chin lock and tried to cut his head with a razor blade. And Davey got so scared when he went halfway through, he went like this and turned his head. And there's a picture in my book of Davey's head bleeding. That was the match where he almost cut the top of his head off. Literally went all the way around, cut the hair and everything on his head. And I had to pick Davey up and run him to the hospital, which luckily was about a block away. And otherwise he might have bled to death. And so bad things can happen with that. And with Steve, I gripped him in the rear chin lock, and I had the blade in my mouth, and Vince is like as close as that tape is there, or closer. And if he watches me cut Steve's head, it's going to be a big problem for me and Steve, including every fan at the O'Hare Arena in Chicago, and everybody on TV. I mean, if you watch it, you can see everybody standing up. And I cut Steve's head. It's like this perfect little cut. You could put a dime in his head like a piggy bank. It was so about that deep and that wide. And I think that made the whole match. That's the iconic moment for Steve Austin. And if we hadn't done that, things might be a lot different today.